Um, Ready, Ms. Shellman and Ms. Williams?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At this time, we'd like to call the CPS Board of Trustees meeting to be held on April 26, 2021 at 1 p.m. We'd like to call it to order. And Ms. Shellman, would you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Steen? Ms. Gonzalez? Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Mayor Nurnberg? Not here yet. Dr. Mackey?
Present.
We have a quorum, sir. You may proceed.
At this time, we would go ahead and I know Mayor Nuremberg normally does the safety message, and Ms. Paula Williams, would you please proceed with your safety message?
Well, hello, and thank you. This is our first official board meeting today in our boardroom, and we very much have thought a lot about coming back and making sure that we bring back people safely. We appreciate the fact that in this case, the board can see each other, and we're using a little bit different technology in this place. Now, we do have, this is our very first one, so we are observing the physical distancing rules. And we, by preference, people who have not had their shots very much are, I think, taking the choice of making sure that they wear their mask and not talk for a long period of time without it. I'm starting out this message, but ultimately, I'm going to use my mask for the majority of the meeting. That said, we are still an essential service. We are still focused on staying safe and keeping our employees and the public safe. So we very much are continuing, and I've said from the very beginning, we were the first ones in to the let's practice carefully. We were doing elbow bumps and had sanitizer all over, and we will probably be the last ones out. Again, with the 3,100 employees that we have, we want to make sure that we are keeping them safe. To date, since the inception of our protocols and tracking everything that we knew as positive cases, we are now at 994 positive cases in total. We have a lower amount of people in quarantine this week, this month. Right now, at this date, we have 51 people in quarantine. We've had as many as in the high 200s, and so we are pleased that our number is down, but we still have that. And we have no one in the hospital at this time. Our team continues to diligently monitor what is happening across the city and what's happening across Bexar County. We continue to monitor all the reports that are put out by the county and the city. Our team closely monitors the updates that come from the mayor and the county judge on a regular basis. And we continue to look at all the safe practices that are required as we start to see more and more people be vaccinated and the community open up more over time. So more to come. We are thankful that our people are doing well. Our processes that we implemented last year very much are in place, and it's become part of our process. We'll have more people able to enter rooms over time, but again, this is our very first one. And so I will conclude, once the mayor is able to give his update, I would like to have Loretta kind of get an official update about the lay of the building and how we're handling some safety protocols, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Here, Dr. Mackey.
At this time, Mayor Nuremberg, your safety message.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Paula. Thank you all for accommodating my late arrival here. Very pleased to be with you and also to report our city's progress on safety measures with regard to the COVID-19 situation. Very proud, and I do want to get the message right off the bat that our vaccination effort has gone quite well. We've had over 1 million doses of the vaccine already administered here in Bexar County. And I want to emphasize this much. I hope everyone can hear me. If you have not gotten a vaccine yet and you are eligible to do so, please go get one. You do not even need an appointment anymore. You can go to the Alamo Dome or to St. Philip's College or to Wonderland Mall after noon, and we will have a vaccine available for you. There are doses and we have more doses than we have appointments at this point, appointments filled, that is. So if you need a dose, if you need your vaccine, go and get one. We've got enough for you. Other thing I'd like to say is that we have been now in the city of San Antonio and Bexar County have had a below 2.5 positivity rate for the last month. That's as good. That's actually much better than any major metro in the state of Texas for the last month. And we're proud of that because that means that everyone in our community has been doing their part. The simple things like mask wearing to make sure that they're protecting themselves and other people from this virus. So I'm going to report that that number has held steady, in fact has dropped a little bit over the last week, even though testing is still continuing as it has. So we are doing quite well with containment of the virus as we get through the last phase, I think, of this pandemic. And hopefully within the next few months, we can fully declare that we've gotten very close, or as close as you can be at this point, to beating the coronavirus in San Antonio. Just some real quick numbers here that it might be interesting for you is that of our over 65 population, already 57.1% of over 65 have been fully vaccinated. A full 85% have gotten at least one dose. And we are working through the rest of our population, and thus far, over 35% have been fully vaccinated, and 54% as of last week have gotten at least one dose. So thank you to all of our community partners doing quite well to protect one another from this virus and also to get everybody vaccinated. So go get your vaccine, and thank you very much, Chairman. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mayor, and thank you, CEO, for your great safety report. And thank you, Mr. Steen.
Mayor, since you all at the City Council have been doing in-person meetings for how long?
We've been back now for 2 sessions, and we will, we're back in person with our city council meetings. So we have general public audience seating as well as our hearings. City council is not yet back in person for our work sessions, but we anticipate doing that within the next month or so.
So we were talking before you came. How should we be handling this? If I felt comfortable taking off my mask during the meeting, is that okay?
Again, the
I'm
general...
going on your experience with it.
Yeah, the general guidance remains that if you are within social distance, if you're within 6 feet of someone else who's not part of your family, your household, to wear a mask. And that is unless both of you within the distance are vaccinated. So if you know that everyone is fully vaccinated within that distance and you're able to determine that and also not wear a mask, you should be fine. In this environment, I would suggest that, again, we're socially distanced here. If you want to take off your mask while you're speaking, I think there's nothing wrong with that. Probably protocols would say we could all take our masks off since we're socially distanced. I think it's a good idea just for now if we keep our mask on while we're not talking. And then as you're talking, if you want to take your mask off, I think that'd be fine.
Well, I think just... Yeah, I'm vaccinated. You're vaccinated. Dr. Mackey?
I'm vaccinated, but I'm going to keep my mask on.
You are, Ed? And you all? No, you're not. How about you, Michelle? Eric? Are you?
Yes, sir.
I'm halfway there, so.
I'm halfway.
Oh, you're halfway, okay.
Yeah.
At this time, we'd like to bring Loretta up and give us a little scope of the building.
Thank you, Chair Dr. Mackey. I'm also only half vaccinated, so I'll keep my mask on. But because this is the first meeting in the new building, we wanted to review the evacuation procedures with you so that we're prepared to be safe in the event of an emergency. If you hear the fire alarm, follow the instructions that I'm about to provide you. If asked to evacuate, use the glass door exiting out of the boardroom to the outside, which would be this way. If that door is blocked, use the door at the rear of the room, which would be right over there. Verbally alert others to the room of the fire and evacuate. Then move to the main parking lot in front of the headquarters or the AT&T parking lot over the McCullough-Brooklyn Bridge, whichever route is safer. And at that point, you would await further instructions from us. In the event of a situation like this, our security team will be monitoring the situation and will notify the appropriate emergency services and team members. We also have employees nearby who are trained to administer first aid if needed. Safety is our top priority at CPS Energy, and while we hope this information is never needed, we want to be sure that you are always ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Great safety message there. At this time, can we have invocation by Deborah Wainscott?
Thank you, Chair Dr. Mackey. I am fully vaccinated, I'm proud to say, so I'll take my mask off. Please join me in the invocation. Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this day that you've given us, for its blessings, its opportunities, its challenges. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance, and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. We ask for your hand of blessing on this meeting of the CPS Energy Board of Trustees. Help us to accomplish our goals while displaying your character. Help us to do good, to be honest, to serve others, and to fulfill our obligations to the community. We pray these things in your name. Amen.
Ms. Wainscott, hey, thank you for that. Could you lead us in the pledge, please?
Yes, sir.
We stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Okay, at this time, we have public comments. And we have one person. Okay, if you would bring the one person.
All right, the next agenda item is public comment, which provides an opportunity for members of the public to share thoughts on any of this meeting's posted agenda items. Here's how the process will work. We'll invite pre-registered speakers to speak in the order in which they registered, with in-person commenters speaking first. Today, we don't have any in-person commenters, so we'll go straight to our virtual commenters. They may address the board on CPS Energy-related business listed on the posted agenda for this meeting. Speakers should state their first name and last name, what organization or group they represent, if applicable, and indicate the agenda item number they're going to speak about. We'll go ahead and transition to our virtual speakers. Adrian, can you introduce our first virtual speaker?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Loretta. Our first virtual speaker is Richard Pettis. Mr. Pettis, you will be unmuted now, and you have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mackey and members of the CPS Energy Board of Trustees. My name is Richard Pettis, and I am the President and CEO of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and welcome back. I wanted to take a moment to provide a few comments on the action the Board of Trustees took this past Thursday. I had signed up, and for whatever reason, technical difficulties prevented me from giving my comments, but it's regarding the bylaws adoption and appointment of the CPS Energy Rate Advisory Committee. As you will probably remember, the Chamber was initially against the idea of creating a Rate Advisory Committee, but through listening and understanding the justification and recommendations by your CEO, Paula Williams, on the service and function of the body, we have changed our position to support. Additionally, we appreciate that the individuals you have appointed to the Rate Advisory Committee appear balanced and I believe will provide thoughtful recommendations to the Board of Trustees, your CEO, and her staff. Even so, however, I would like to state for the record that the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce and other business and industry groups still fully expect to weigh in as organizations regarding all the business perspectives that this group will provide, the information they'll give you. We believe that our job is to assist them. And we will continue to attend your meetings. We'll continue to provide you input on any and all board actions and issues that come before the CPS Energy Board of Trustees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Perez.
That was our last registered speaker. I'll turn the meeting back over to Chair Dr. Mackey.
Thank you, Loretta. At this time, we'd like to hear the CEO's report.
Thank you, Dr. Mackey, and thank you, board members and attendees in today's meeting. I have a written report today. I'm just going to provide some high-level commentary about that report. This information will also be posted on our website shortly after our meeting. So, of course, we continue to need to be self-critical and look at the storm as a tragic event and an ability for us to focus on what we need to do to make things much more improved and to help prevent similar situations in the future. So we continue to have a lot of focus on answering questions, providing information, and we want to make sure that the board continues to get information about our portfolio, what we've did, what we're looking at for improvement, and we continue to cooperate in other reviews that are happening across the state, across the nation, and of course here for CPS Energy. In this report, what is focused on is we are looking at power generation in particular. There's a lot of work for us to look at our distribution system as well, and our communication activities, all of which, again, we look for things that we can do differently and better in the future. In this report, though, I'm going to focus on what generation occurred for us, and again, what we're looking at prospectively. So on the first page, I think the high note is that, again, you can look at this and, we are cooperating, we are working with different types of agencies, including the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, which is a regulatory entity that provides us quite a bit of guidance, and they're helping, I think, ultimately to look at standardization across the nation and including Texas and the ERCOT system. What I'd like to point out, we did have challenges during the storm. There wasn't one technology that we did not have an issue with. We don't believe there's any villains in terms of the technology standpoint. All technology has their benefits and all technology has their challenges and issues. But when you look at our overall performance of how we came out, as far as availability of plants, we had about an 85% availability of all the plants in our portfolio. Go to the second page. Now, plant availability is one thing. The ability to be able to produce generation is another. Interestingly, our ability to produce generation was about 84%, so very close, a tight range between availability and production. It basically means that we lost about 16% of our generation. And if you look at the chart to the right, the smaller circle, it gives the breakdown of what those components were and how they relate to what we lost. From our perspective, I'll look around the chart overall. We had some electrical control issues, and that happens when you do have, these are basically big, complicated machines. About 41% of the outages on about 160 hours of lost production, about 42% came from the electrical controls issue. About 8.7% of that lost capacity came from the weather. We had some constraints, not very much, about 0.5% due to water constraints during the time for the plants. And the mechanical issues were about 30.3%. And fuel, the constraint or the inability to get natural gas to our systems primarily, about 18.9%. So we actually, over the time period, actually produced about 1 million megawatts of capacity when you add it all together, either produced or what we should have been able to produce. So it's a lot of hours overall. And then if you go down to the next chart, there are the plants that we maintain on a regular basis, but there are also plants that we contract with. They're basically our renewable PPAs, and then nuclear is actually managed by a separate entity. We own about 40% of the nuclear assets, but we do not manage those assets. And so you can get some additional information. Again, I'll provide them today, and then we'll continue to provide more information publicly and to the board going forward. On the next page, on page 3, for the hours that we were able to ultimately produce generation, you can see the ratio. And I think the the interesting thing overall is this is just the allocation ratio, not the total, per se from the focus, but the allocation of when you look at it by coal, nuclear, combined cycle, gas, steam, peakers are, I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, wind and solar. So you can see all of that in terms of production. Then when you look at the capacity overall, nuclear still, even though we had a plant go down in the middle of the event, about 88% of that availability was there. Solar and wind did not produce. Once again, they are primarily meant to produce in the summer. With the winter peak, they were not forecasted to produce very much, but it shows that's what we actually experience in the winter peak. And then you can see a breakout of the other performance areas. So we still did fairly well with our peakers, our combined cycle unit about 84%, as well as our coal units. But our steam units where we struggled more with the availability of fuel was about 70%. So there's production, and then there have been quite a few questions about emissions from the different types of generation that we have. And part of the thing that we went through when we were looking at the storm, it's important in some cases if you can have dual capacity production. If you could produce energy from both natural gas or oil, that gives you more flexibility. And we did, in some cases, try to get more oil to actually get more production. The most important thing was to try to get more production to keep people warm. Of the amount that we had that was lost because of the fuel challenges, and if you remember that other chart, from the total loss, about 160 megawatt hours, about 30,000 of those megawatt hours were lost because we had the constraint. We didn't have as much fuel as the plants could use to produce power. And so, but relative to the over 1 million hours of production, when you add production and the lost capacity, it was only about 3% overall. But that 3% mattered. And again, we're going to continue to look at what we should do in terms of having a dual fuel capacity and thinking about what really works in terms of keeping people warm. The couple of other things that I want to highlight for you is that we only have one set of our peakers that really has dual energy production. It's Milton B. Lee units, and their peakers are about 50 megawatts each, units 5 through 8. And they are ready to go and fairly functional. We did not construct peakers 1 through 4 to be dual fuel, and we have the capacity to look at our other plants because they either don't have good functioning systems or they were never designed to have that capacity to go back and forth. And it does take effort for the staff to move back and forth from one type of fuel to another. Some of the things that constrained us from using fuel oil in the past is it is more expensive. I'm on to page 4 now. If you look at page 4, there's a couple of bullets there, and it kind of shows you non-storm Uri prices, where in reality we pay about $3 per MMBTU for natural gas, but the natural price of oil is about $16. So from an economic standpoint, we've also been moving from fuel oil for some time because it has just been normally the way the market works. That price, there's a ton of it, or many tons and units of natural gas. It's in the ground and it's available. So the abundance of it, the volumes of natural gas have made it what we typically talk about is the transitional fuel, the base fuel. The pricing has typically been good, and so we didn't have a lot of focus on trying to use fuel oil in the past. When we think about our pillars and think about reliability, though, I think we're going to have to balance between now and as we continue to move in the future. How do we think about optimizing fuel oil to some degree, particularly during a natural crisis, because production and reliability get to be a really important measure when we're in the middle of a storm. So if I go to page 5 of 9, a couple of things I just want to highlight. Here we are, we're in April, working through, as you can see above, the Flex Power Bundle and looking at that selection. We do understand that we're getting more questions about the Flex Power Bundle, and we have a a session coming up with the board where we were looking to add a section and talk a bit more about the choices of what we're doing in this first version of the Flex Power Bundle. And I want to highlight, though, the Flex Power Bundle was designed to be a summer peaking product. The capacity that it was replacing are units that primarily perform in the summer. As we look forward, we're going to have to think about a winter peaking product. The green highlights to the right highlight if we want to, and we're going to bring some more information to the board and potential options to look at, wanting to switch and expand our ability to have more fuel switching. We really can't get to that and really be effective probably until the fall. We're going to have to think of a lot of things. We have to get through the summer and actually just produce, and we're really getting ready to hit the normal peak of the year. But planning, getting board input, putting options in front of you, the best time for us to do that is probably in the fall period, trying to get more prepared for the next winter peak. We're also going to have to look for funds and really think about, again, as we propose to the board and council, what do we need to move forward to make sure we're putting more investments in and thinking about options like this. And the chart below also just shows, when you look at it by a unit basis, we're thinking that the two primary segments of our portfolio are the other peaker units, Milton B. Lee units 1 through 4, and potentially our Arthur von Rosenberg units. Going to page 6, we've done some estimates. When we look at the costs associated with both retrofitting units 1 through 4 and actually buying increased levels of supply, that'll cost about $24.5 million. And that's on the Milton B. Lee units 1 through 4. And then the AVR units, Arthur von Rosenberg units, to be able to convert that, retrofit the units, and put in more supply, about $35.6 million. Now, there are other units to look at. However, if we can go back real quick to the prior chart. One of the problems that we have when you look at it, the Bronick units and the summer units, and potentially the spruce units, all of which we need to get board formal compliance with, really are looking like they can potentially retire before 2030. So we have to think about whether some of these investments to actually expand it to other units is a good use of money, or again, do we look at more Flex Power Bundle options? I'm gonna keep going. Emissions, we have to think about that because we do have permits that allow a certain amount of emissions per unit. And it did happen this last time before Uri came, there was a slight relaxing of the emissions. But we have to be careful that if those relaxed standards don't occur, we could actually have environmental compliance issues where we can't keep up and limit ourselves, or we can't produce enough energy and make sure that we're not violating compliance issues. Again, the state was very responsive, but we're going to have to think about this. And I think if you look at it, you can compare natural gas just has lower levels of emissions when you look at the different type of emissions. So it does matter whether or not in the state there's an alignment about how do we handle this, particularly through the transition to different types of new and cleaner technologies. I'm going to go on to slide 8. My primary point, there's been a lot of questions about weatherization and what we've done. I'll have another document for you in May where we'll talk to you about the weatherization that we have done. We have done about $18 million of capital investments and about $3 million of O&M. And we're also in the middle of doing a bit more investment on the capital side right now. So again, CPS Energy did actually weatherize, and we're going to go back and look at where we had some challenges on freezing lines that froze, those types of things, but we did make those investments. We are going back now currently and looking at what we have for weatherization and looking at where we need to improve and where we can make enhancements in light of what we've learned during the storm. A couple of highlights I want to, indicate to you is that we believe that ERCOT, the state, will come up with new standards associated with the weatherization. We think that we have to look at whether or not there was really a 100-year event or how frequently that event that happened in February 2021 would occur. That will change the standards. We managed to the standards at the time, and we believe the standards are going to change. We are staying in close contact with elected officials at the state level and with regulators in different agencies to look to see what might come out as true standards to manage to, but we're not going to wait for that. We're going to continue to look at what we have. We're currently putting in additional electric outlets and looking at our enclosure approach to what we did in the past storm to see what we could do to improve those and make them a lot warmer for our plants. We're also looking at our critical equipment list and spare parts inventory. Now, I'm now on the last page, 9 of 9. And looking at, again, can we reassess all our equipment to make sure that we are have all the right equipment as critical spare parts invested in and be even more ready for any future event. We're evaluating our enclosure plans to identify any sizing or composition changes. We're looking at more portable heaters. We had portable heaters during the event, but because it lasted so long, we think we need to put more investments in that and to really kind of make it a more efficient process. We're looking at how we store chemicals in facilities, trying to make sure that those chemicals are more closely and readily available to make sure that if we have to do any repairs or anything that makes the plants more operational, that we have them and have rethought the flow of having access to that. And then we're relooking at our staffing plans relative to how do we work during a storm and how do we prepare overall. So those are our Q date processes, and more information is coming.
Thank you to CEO Go Williams. Do we have any questions or comments at this time for the CEO?
I do, Paula. So knowing that ERCOT may come up with new standards and guidelines, how will that affect our work in progress, right? Not only to assess what took place, what you just presented, and then our resiliency path moving forward. Do you see more planning and then it will be finalized based on their feedback, or do we think that ERCOT's updating their guideline will take longer than our desire to have some things in place? I know it's a loaded question and you may not be able to answer it yet. So I just want to make sure that we know that right now we're kind of evaluating a lot of different things. And so I just wanted to see if you could answer.
We are evaluating, and we're going to do as many things as we think are no regrets moves moving forward, and we're going to stay in touch with ERCOT. We have heard that they may do a study. Studies sometimes take a very long time, but we do believe that we could see some things that can be approved now. We're also going to be doing some benchmarking with other utilities and associations. So we think we can pick some no regrets move. And then when we do get that guidance, we'll just blend into what we've done by what the new standards are.
And who will provide us that? And who's going to provide us kind of like, is that governmental affairs for CPS that will kind of give us feedback or where we stand with what their guidance are? Or how do we get that information?
Yes, governmental affairs that reports to Carolyn they have connections at the state and the federal level. So they're monitoring all of these developments currently. We have been asked to participate in some of the activities, not so much on the specifics of weatherization yet, but we do believe that the standards have to be relooked at, so we recommended that. And so our team is actively working with elected officials at both.
Is there a way that we can get like a frequent update?
Sure.
From the team
Yes, ma'am.
on this matter specifically? Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Paula, for the briefing. What is the process and what will the timeline be for the fuel oil conversion evaluation report back to the board?
I think we should have something to you in the next couple of months.
Okay. Because I'll just be candid. Hearing your report and the challenges with the fuel oil conversion in terms of maintenance costs, the cost of fuel, the emissions, makes me wonder why we would go that route for 3% of lost capacity during the event. I know there has been other solutions mentioned, including, I think H-E-B and other big box retailers are using a particular type of generation capacity that uses very low low pressure natural gas to essentially create giant generators in the event that they're needed. But It just seems to me that the evidence presented so far in your summary report on fuel oil conversion, for all the other reasons, would move us in a different direction than going that route.
Mayor, I thoroughly understand your points. We're going to just look at all options just to make sure that we're giving the board the full aspects, and we'll run them all through the pillars so that you can see them. We are also working with Enchanted Rock as well, and we're looking to, we have a project going on with businesses through the SAEDF that is focused on what we can do in a resiliency framework, and there's more to come on that. And we're working with some of the suburban cities who want to look at resiliency. So, and those types of options, like the natural gas generators and things like that, as well as batteries and other things. We're going to look at all of that.
Good, okay, so anyone listening to the conversation will be assured then that we aren't deciding right now what that solution will be. We're just evaluating all options, and we'll take those in stride.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Here's my other question. What is the cost for, or what was the budget set aside for the flex plan?
Well, that kind of goes through fuel, and so I don't have the exact numbers, but it's not cheap when you think of the entire
Well,
project.
the reason why I was asking, and again, we haven't had a thorough analysis, right, of cost and benefits. And even though we want to move in that direction for summer resiliency, I'm wondering if we can kind of rework the budgets where we take some from that to potentially some other stronger resiliency with gas, oil.
We will definitely bring all types of options so you can see if we wanted to redesign the Flex Power Bundle. But I will say, one of the things to keep in mind is we have hundreds of megawatts of capacity coming off. And so ultimately, we need to bring you all of the above and show you different options. We will do that.
Right. I know my question might be premature, but I'm just in my mind trying to figure out how we can take from here to give to here and kind of repurpose our budgets to meet some immediate wins and then plan for the future. So thank you for answering.
You have any other questions, any board members? Okay, if not, at this time, we'd like to move on to procurement review. Ms. Gold Williams, we have the new initiative enhancing procurement controls and general services, A, B, and then C, general services, therefore overhead electric distribution services. If you would take over that.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I would like to just make a couple of comments as Corey comes to the podium to do his presentation. What we are doing all of the time is looking for what do we need to do in terms of procurement? How do we very much, what you'll see primarily here is how do we augment and utilize third parties to help us get things done? And the way that I look at staffing overall is we know that there are peaks and valleys of production, of generation, but there's also peaks and valleys associated with work. And so we do use contractors significantly to help us with those peaks. When we hire someone, and you all know that we've been in a strategic hiring freeze, basically looking to replace the positions that we need, but we're not looking in any way to expand our headcount at all. And we're trying to be as prudent as possible, which has financially helped us. But we also think about when we hire an employee, we're paying for their salaries, their benefits, and that's a long-term commitment, particularly their benefits, because you think about it in terms of them being active and then when they move into retirement. So oftentimes it's easier and actually more cost-effective for us to hire contractors when we can use them for peaks of jobs and activities and then bring them down. So you will see that. Now, I will say that I have been looking at the control environment around our procurement, and this month, again, you will find that we have one more issue again where the controls around the procurement weren't great. You heard one in, I think it was the February timeframe, and we needed authorization to pay the remaining invoices. Again, we have another situation where we need to pay the remaining invoices. They have not been paid. We've gone through that, looked at them, reevaluated them, validated them, and we've looked at the controls around that. What I've asked the financial services team, primarily Corey, to help us with is relooking at our procurement controls because we can't keep having these front-end issues on invoice processing. So there's one procurement that has a challenge with that. That is C, 6C. But what Corey's going to do is talk to you about, we're going to have a tone at the top. We already have. We've been having a lot of conversations about controls being tighter around our procurement. And then we don't have any issue on the procurement and timing of 6B, but 6C, you'll also get a preview of what happened there.
Thank you, Paula. Good afternoon, Chair Dr. Mackey, good to be here. Trustees, also good to be here in person. So appreciate the intro, Paula. Really good tee up. I wanted to come here, provide a little bit of color around internal controls broadly, and also talk about our global focus that Paula mentioned on the culture and the mindset perspective around internal controls here at CPS. And as Paula alluded to, also acknowledge the opportunity for enhanced work within our procurement area. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started here on the objectives. We have 3 of them today. I'll provide some context on the overall control environment. As Paul alluded to, we'll focus on briefly some of the recent lapses in procurement controls. And then we'll talk about the positive change that our teams are trying to drive in our control culture. And we're doing that through partnerships and through trainings. So on the next slide here for the agenda in alignment with the objectives, I'll hit on that enterprise level control. And then we'll introduce some of the internal controls team members. We'll put some names and faces out there and then talk about the approach our teams are doing. And then we'll close with some next steps. So on the next slide, broadly, as Paul's alluded to, we have a strong internal controls foundation here at CPS Energy. We've had various different internal trainings here at CPS Energy. We've had various kind of awareness campaigns, and so there's been a lot of work done over the last handful of years. And as Paula mentioned, we've had a really great tone at the top, support from her and from Gary as well. In spite of that, we've still seen an uptick in some of those recent related internal control issues in the procurement area. But nonetheless, the message is here, we're going to continue to work closely with the business units and really enhance that control culture. The control culture is a big word because we can do a lot of education and awareness training, but really getting our folks to see their process start to finish as the control built into that process rather than an add-on or an extra activity. That's really the essence and substance that we want to continue to improve upon through the organization. And so here's a look at the team here on the next slide. Of course, you can see Gary and myself going left to right, and then we have Orlando Flores, who leads our Enterprise Risk Management Solutions area, and you've seen him often in our risk meetings. But within the Enterprise Risk Management and Solutions team, there is an internal controls group, and I want to introduce those folks virtually. Jennifer Barrera is our Manager of Internal Controls, and you can see by the number of letters after her name, she is well credentialed for that position. And also on her team is Roger Gonzalez. He's been with our team. He's the newest member, but he comes from our Audit Services department under Matt Mills' leadership. So he was ready to hit the ground running. It's been a great addition to our team. And then lastly, we have Jimmy Cool. He's a CPA. He's been with our team for a couple of years, but he came from our accounting department prior to that. So again, a lot of folks here. We have an experienced team here in financial services. We're leveraging that tone at the top, and these are the folks that are going to be partnering with the business units to strengthen that control culture. And also, I'll note, we do a lot of partnership with the Audit Services Division as well, and collectively, I think it's a really strong group of folks to partner and work on this effort with. So we'll go to the next slide. Let's talk about kind of the approach looking forward, kind of 3 big buckets. The first and foremost is increased awareness, and this is a continuous effort that's been going on and continues to go on, just about the importance of internal controls. And it's really at all employee levels, throughout the organization. And that's the message. And we do this through trainings and through different outreaches, but that is a continuous effort. The second one is really expanding the consultative services. And this is something, that's been a focus for us, here recently. We really do want to get out in the organization, better understand those business processes, help the organization understand their process and the impact of internal controls, and ultimately, how can we help design and enhance control activities? And our organization is really at an advantage to be able to partner with the organization kind of side by side as they work through their activities. And really kind of break down some of that jargon too, translate it into kind of real world language for them. And the last item is really just correcting issues, of course. And not only our teams going in there when there are opportunities, but really all of the senior leaders have been challenged and they've bought into this to culturally and procedurally really dive deeply through the organization to find and fix problems. So in terms of next step, pretty straightforward here. We're going to continue to leverage the Paula's and Gary's tone at the top, prioritization of this issue. It's always, important to have that leadership and that perspective at a very high level. We'll continue to collaborate with Audit Services. We've really had a great partnership the last handful of years on the enterprise-wide internal controls training that we've rolled out. And we're continuing to put forth to build rather, another version this year for our frontline field office folks. And so that is kind of work in progress. And then continually consult with the organization to help be proactive, do spot checks where necessary, have the organization be able to do their own spot checks and build that muscle. And then as Paul alluded to, we're going to continue to focus and spend some extra time with the procurement teams. Jennifer's already started diving into that, and that'll probably be a focus here, in the next handful of months for sure. And then lastly, and always continue to reinforce, how throughout the organization, how we all own our own risks. And we've talked about risk a lot in other presentations, but we own our own risks and our controls. And so with that, the takeaway is we'll continue to come back from a financial services perspective and update you on our progress on how those kind of macro efforts are going throughout the organization. With that, I will pause, sir, and entertain any questions before the next presenter.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, Corey, I do have a question. When you talk about you're collaborating with audit services, are you talking about the internal audit function of the company, or are you talking something different there?
Yes, sir. I am referring to our internal audit services area. led by
You're
Matt Rose.
working with your normal internal audit people as well, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, that's exactly who.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, see you. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you very
Good
much.
presentation.
Corey, quick question. So how does this align with, Paula mentioned we've had some issues with procurement billing, right? So how do you work with, once someone becomes a vendor, it falls on what side of the house or what person? Like, what's the full cycle? It starts here, we win a contract, it goes here. And what's that process there?
Yeah, so the process is very detailed through setting up a vendor in our system and go through the procurement. My particular team's role is kind of a consultant and come in and look at the process start to finish. And so as an example, with the items you'll hear in the third presentation, we would go in and kind of do a kind of a walkthrough with the organization on the field rep or the gentleman or woman who is owning the relationship, all the way through the actual payment, which goes through to AP. And so our team is kind of this extra layer, so to speak. But the players are the frontline owners that are in the actual organization, the business unit, through our financial services who execute the payment of it.
Vice Chair Gonzalez, maybe just to add to Corey's comment, supply chain. Supply chain would be the primary that would look at the controls around getting the vendor set up and educated and work through.
Right, so it would be yours, and then the frontline people that you just, some of them that you presented, and then the collaboration would be with supply chain.
Yes.
And supply chain falls under Lisa.
Lisa.
So my question is, are they two separate systems or one system? It has an actual, like a real-time life cycle from start to finish.
They're two separate systems inside of SAP. So the procurement has its
So
own
two
system.
systems, there's a reason why I'm asking.
Okay.
We don't have transfer, so it's two systems within SAP. And what are those, may I ask what those two systems are?
You have the supply chain system overall, and then you have the payment and procurement system. Actually, you have some others where you
Yeah, I
actually
was
look at the
gonna
work
say.
orders. So we can get you a diagram of that.
Yeah, can you give me a workflow of that? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again. Trustees, Chair Dr. Mackey.
Thank you.
I'm here today to present on the Managed Service Provider Program. That is on the consent agenda for your approval today for additional funding. I'm here to provide additional context and details and to answer any questions that you might have prior to that approval. So for our objectives and takeaways today, I'll provide you with some background information on the Managed Service Provider or MSP program, provide you with an overview of the current provider and our proposed go-forward strategy, as well as seek your approval for that go-forward strategy, and then discuss next steps. For the agenda, I'll touch on the guiding pillars and foundation and talk to you about how those guiding pillars help us to make decisions related to our MSP program. Give you a little bit of background information on the program, as well as an overview of the current provider, and then go through our proposed go-forward strategy and next steps. So as we do with all of the main decisions that we make at CPS Energy, we look to the guiding pillars and foundation to ensure that we're making financially responsible decisions related to our MSP program. The pillars most relevant to the program are reliability, customer affordability, and resiliency. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the term managed service provider, it is a one umbrella contract that manages multiple temporary or contract worker contracts under that one contract umbrella. It streamlines invoicing, recruiting, hiring, work time approval, and reporting all in their one system under that one contract umbrella. And the program often uses an on-site representative for more efficiency. We do have an on-site representative from the vendor that works with us on a day-to-day basis on our program. As you all know, we have a stable workforce of about 3,000 employees, and we use contractors. As Paula said, we use contractors throughout the organization, in the field as well as in the office, to help us to meet short-term needs. For example, we might have an IT project that we need to ramp up quickly. We might use contractors for that IT project to help us on a short-term basis while our full-time employees are concentrating on their full-time functions and responsibilities. As the call-out box at the bottom of the slide indicates, we did transition in fiscal year 2019 from 12 separate staffing agency contracts to the one MSP provider program with all of the subcontractor suppliers under one contract.
Deborah, do you have any idea of how many contracts / temporary workers you average at any one time? Is there any reasonable average? You got 3,000 plus or minus permanent employees, right? So do you have a estimate of what your average would be with temporary employees?
We use contractors throughout the company, Trustee Kelly, and I don't have that number throughout the company that aren't under this program, but we have about 170 contractors currently under the MSP program right now.
Couple of questions. We talk about it was 12 million, now it's 20 million annually. What is the savings?
We actually saved about $1.5 million in the first 2 years of the program with the reduced markup fees through Broadleaf. And we haven't revisited with them for the current year, but it was about $1.5 million over that.
But we're spending, it went from 12 to 20 million annually, and we're only saving 1.5?
And actually, so let me explain more about that. So that it was initially projected to be $12 million over the 3-year contract life. In the last 6 months of the current year, we did tick up on that spending, and it's actually a couple of reasons. So during the pandemic, in order to help us to control staffing levels and not make those long-term commitments, as Paula mentioned, we were able to use contractors more for meeting those short-term needs. So that was one of the reasons that we had that uptick. The other reason is that we are also utilizing it for temporary to permanent assignments, and where we convert them at the end of that 90-day or 180-day period at when there aren't any conversion fees. That was not initially projected to be a part of this contract. So we actually, for example, just recently added 41 utility workers through the staff augmentation MSP program, and that allows us to try before you buy.
I'm familiar, actually. So my question to you would be, what is that percentage? Because sometimes it could be up to 30% for that conversion fee, based on their salary.
Yes, now we typically wait unless there's some sort of urgent need, which there typically isn't. We typically wait to the end of that period, and there isn't a conversion fee once we wait.
To know. My other question would be, since you have a master, normally I'm more familiar with it being an IDIQ, right? So you select so many companies. In this case, you have one big company. Are they competing task orders among the subcontractors? Or do the subcontractors specialize in different types of staffing?
It's actually a vendor-neutral program, so when we have requests for them, they go out to all of the subcontractor suppliers at the same time.
It's a competitive process?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then I guess I would like, I know you probably want a decision today, but it would be, I think sometimes you have to outweigh, again, insourcing versus outsourcing, and what is that savings? If you were to have taken away the need to surge support for the pandemic, what really would have been a true, savings or a true cost, right? I mean, this is actually a true cost, but you know what I mean? If we're not always going to be spending that amount of time, why would we want to award at a higher?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
I guess my question would, the consideration would be is why award a certain dollar amount if it was a unique circumstances with the pandemic? Or do we foresee, due to a hiring freeze, keeping that? And if so, I would want to know what specifically that savings would be.
So it may not be any more savings going forward, but it does allow us to take advantage of the needs that we have in the organization for short-term basis without making long-term commitments. So it allows us to control our staffing at a stable number without having to hire and make long-term commitments and pay additional benefits and the long-term commitments that you would make to a full-time employee. That's one of the biggest advantages of the program.
If I could add, this would only take us, I thought, through August of 2022, of which case you're going to reevaluate the whole thing to think about the new run rate. But we're going to need to get through, we're going to probably keep the hiring strategy, particularly for utility workers and different positions like that, and then look to transition. So you raise a really good point, and we can update that and get that done for the next update.
I guess I'm looking at the ceiling, because typically you don't leave them open-ended. So if you're going to ask us for something, I would imagine that we're only approving the ceiling amount. Doesn't mean we have to spend the entire amount.
That's correct, yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that, because
Yes, ma'am.
I feel a little uncomfortable, frankly, for that amount right now, with not a lot of data on savings. Some of the questions, Ed's question was very valid, Mr. Kelly's, as far as like, what was the average run rate? What is the average that we had historically, and now because of the uptick or planning strategy?
Yeah, so I mean, I can go into that in a little bit of detail if you want me to on the, we actually spent about $10 million in the first year of the contract. That was pre-pandemic. And then during the pandemic is when we saw the uptick. In the last 6 months to the last quarter was when we were on a close to $20 million spend rate. It was about almost $19 million. And so just allowing for the ability to, have more temp to perm conversions if we need to, and it would only be on an as-needed basis. Yes, ma'am. And then, like Paula said, once our current RFP is completed, we would come back to you with updated numbers, most recent numbers for a new contract funding. So this timeline shows the implementation time required and the contract period for putting the current contract in place. To orient you to the slide, the green, let me see if I can point here. The green graphics, the bracket at the top and the green line at the bottom represent the RFP period that we took. We took an extensive amount of time to build the RFP, to send that RFP out, and then to take a lot of time to fully evaluate the respondent bids once they came in. So it took us about a year to put this, to look through the RFP and evaluate it and select a vendor. Once that was done, we came back to the board for approval, and that was in August of 2018. The blue graphics represent the blue graphics here, and at the top of the timeline represent the contract period for the current 3-year contract that we currently have in place. The orange graphics are the implementation period for putting this program in place. It took us about 5 to 6 months to go through the implementation. It was a complex, IT-heavy implementation process so that we could integrate with between our enterprise resource planning system and the vendor's billing, invoicing, and time approval system. Additionally, that orange bar at the bottom of the timeline is represents the time that it took to end the old staffing agency contracts and to transition to the new suppliers under the current program. One of the key points on this timeline is the arrow that indicates the pandemic period. And as you can see, that arrow is pointing out because we aren't through that period yet. We still have challenges related to that period that we'll need to continue to deal with, hopefully for not too much longer into the future. I wanted to give you some information on our current provider. After that year-long RFP process, we did select Broadleaf Results, Inc., and we executed a contract with them after board approval in August of 2018. They've been an MSP provider since 1992. They're a woman-owned, non-local firm. And as I mentioned to Mr. Kelly in response to his question, they're currently supplying about 170 contractors with 21 subcontractor suppliers. They're all being managed under that one umbrella contract. We've been very pleased with Broadleaf's results. They've provided us with excellent service, very responsive, and one of the most important things that we've been pleased about is their commitment to our local and diverse hiring goals. And I'll get into that more in the next slide, more details here. So this pie chart shows the breakdown of the 21 current supplier subcontractors. 17 are local, diverse, or local and diverse. The shades of green are either local, diverse, or local and diverse, with the gray slice of the pie being the ones that are neither local nor diverse. So 77% of the spend through fiscal 21 through 1/31/21 went to those local and or diverse suppliers through the Broadleaf contract. So we've been very pleased with that. But even though we are satisfied with them, their services, and their commitment to our procurement goals, we do want to make sure that we're getting the best value for our customers. And so we have put the MSP program out for bid. The RFP was initiated recently, and we have received 11 responses and are currently evaluating those responses. So in simultaneous to that RFP process, we are proposing to renew the current contract for 1 year and seeking your approval for $24 million in additional funding, $4 million to right-size the current contract with the uptick in spend, and then $20 million for the 1-year extension. And we believe that $20 million will allow us to address short-term needs even as we continue on with the challenges that we have today. So again, that is through the approval on the consent agenda. With the board's approval, we will move forward with next steps, and this timeline indicates those next steps. Similar to the previous timeline, the green graphics represent the RFP process, and that's the process that we're currently in the middle of and reviewing those responses. The blue graphic is the current contract period ending on in August. the blue line is the one-year extension that we're proposing. And then the blue bracket at the top of the timeline would be the new contract that would be put into place after we come back to you for, again, with the end of that RFP process. The orange line at the top of that bracket is, again, the implementation period that we want to make sure that we allow plenty of time, if a new provider is selected, to make sure that we are, have enough time for implementation to minimize the business disruption to the business areas with a transition to a new provider. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Quick question. So then the master service agreement is with
Broadleaf.
Broadleaf, and then within that, there's 17. Do we have any data? Well, before we go there, why do we have to extend it if the RFPs are under evaluation?
The contract expires in August.
So you're saying that before August, we could not come to a new agreement with the new company?
We could, if we end up selecting a new provider. Previously, it took about 5 months for the implementation of the new vendor with their vendor management system and integrating with our ERP system. So, and then transitioning from old suppliers to new suppliers, we wanted to make sure that we took the time that we needed to make sure that we minimize disruption to the business areas if we do select a new vendor.
Can you provide me a list of revenue by each subcontractor and then how much Broadleaf has made off this contract?
Any more questions or comments? If not, we will proceed. Mr. Clifton? Thank you, Ms. Wingstop.
Okay, good afternoon, trustees and Chair Dr. Mackey. My name's Darrell Clifton. I'm Vice President of Construction and Maintenance Services. Today I'm going to be giving you the procurement preview that Paula had mentioned, where we did have an issue on the overhead electric distribution services correction. And this is on the consent agenda for approval. On the objectives and takeaways, we're going to explain the circumstances with outstanding invoices on a past purchase order. We're also going to explain the corrective measures and then respectfully request on the consent agenda approval to pay the final invoices for the needed procurement. Today's agenda, we're going to give you an overview on our construction contracts, a financial summary background, as well as look at, an overview of the outstanding invoices, and then finally, the next steps. Our overhead services contracts are focused on maintaining system reliability, resiliency, and safety while supporting customer growth. Our electric construction contractors supplement our internal crews. They do customer growth projects, infrastructure modernization projects. They also perform identified maintenance on our distribution system. And recently they have given us staffing capacity for storm restoration. We do appreciate the approval of the new contract. That was a 3-year procurement for $71 million in February. The new contract did maintain continuity of our construction operations. The contracts are in place and they are operating well. This is a high-level financial summary. The prior contract was a 2-year contract. It was split up between 3 different contractors. The issue that we're going to be talking about today is only with one of these contractors. The original 2-year contract did have a contract value of $49.75 million. The issue is we have $3.6 million in outstanding invoices, which does represent an overall contract overspend. And we'll get a little more on that here in some slides. On the issues, the main issue, the issue is we allowed spending to exceed the contract amount. When this issue was identified, we had to go in and account for all the work done against the contract. We did validate that work, and what does remain is that we need to pay the outstanding invoices for the work that was performed. We also realize this is a people issue, and as Corey was talking about earlier, we really need to just change the culture around controls in general, not only in my organization, but throughout the whole organization. On the outstanding invoices, we've identified 3 main issues. The first issue is we did not reserve funds on the PO as we were assigning the work. The second issue is as we were paying the invoices, we were not validating that we were receiving all of the invoices for the work that we assigned and eventually was completed. And while we were doing this, we also, looked at we also found that we needed to really look at the billing process, especially around summary billing to improve the controls. But more likely, we're going to end up needing to eliminate the summary billing process altogether. In general, we must tighten our internal controls to detect missing invoices and other issues earlier in the process. As we identified this issue, we did bring in our audit services team, and they did an assessment of all the outstanding invoices. They were able to verify the invoices were calculated correctly, and they did match the contract requirements. They did identify several opportunities for control improvements, which we are pursuing, and we are working towards implementing controls and processes to remedy all the issues they did find. They are continuing an assessment, and they are going to give a full report out at the July 2021 Audit and Finance Committee meeting. While the audit services was doing their assessment, our internal management team, we did go back and look at all of these outstanding invoices. We double-checked in the field that all the work was completed to our standards and to the quality that we would expect. We also did an analytical review of all the detailed invoices that were not paid, and we compared that to work on similar invoices, and we do believe these charges are reasonable. On the next steps, and as what Corey, mentioned earlier, we are doing a complete leadership systems refresh. We recently, provided additional oversight for the contract management processes within my area. We are reinforcing management accountability, as well as doing a complete refresh on all the training with anyone that manages contracts, from the field representative all the way up to the executives. We're also going to update all of our approaches from the beginning of these contracts to the end. We're going to be looking at how we are requesting the work, how we're accepting the work, and then finally, when we do get the invoices to pay, that we are matching that back to actually what we did request. This is going to be on the consent agenda. Our CEO has reviewed this issue thoroughly, including the planned corrective measures, and has provided her approval. And out of abundance of caution and transparency, we are disclosing this issue today. We are humbly and respectfully requesting your approval to proceed on the consent agenda. The formal request is to request authority not to exceed $3.6 million to pay all the remaining invoices. Also, we are committing to improving our processes and controls throughout our area. Thank you, and I'll be happy to
Do
answer.
you have any questions, please?
I do. What about the responsibility of the vendors you work with? I know I do a lot of federal contracting, and when we have a blanket, an IDIQ this large, I'm very familiar with it. We're required as a small business vendor, one, to get training. We have to learn how to work with the system. Two, we have to submit a spending plan. And three, every time we invoice, we have to demonstrate that we're charging against the ceiling. And if we're coming close, we know by default that I have to provide them with a 30-day notice for a change order, or I stop working because I'm working at risk. I think it's beyond just having internal training for your team. If the vendors don't also have training in ethics, then, I mean, I've never worked with any big organization that just lets me keep charging with no accountability. I mean, I get scrutinized for overspending $200. So I think the process should include also training the vendors, not just the staff.
Agreed.
Yes.
And you will not get my support for this.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, let me make sure I understand how this works. You had a contract for $49,750,000. That contract has expired.
Yes, sir.
We have now executed a new 3-year contract for $71 million. Is it with the same supplier, or is the $71 million with a different contractor completely from the original one?
The new contract has the same 3 suppliers as the previous contract.
As the same supplier?
Yes, sir.
And so we were doing, I guess, and what I used to do, a kind of an audit at the end of the contract period to make sure everything was okay, and you came up with this $3.6 million gap. Is that right?
Yes, sir. We had actually gotten an aging report from our contractor, which was really the first time they had they even made us aware that they did not have payment for, invoices that some of them were as old as 270 days old.
So this will close out then the $59 or the $49 million contract. This will totally close it out.
This will completely close it out, and we are confident that there will be no other charges on
Okay, so
that.
you should get some kind of a legal sign-off then that contract is now closed and fully funded and behind you. And then, as Trustee Gonzalez mentioned, it's not only a matter of training our internal folks, but also making sure that training extends to the contractors, because they should be monitoring the same thing. Make sure there's plenty of room left inside that contract for whatever work they're doing. So, okay, well, I just want to make sure I understood the process.
But that is an excellent point. That is an excellent point, that whatever comes out of this meeting, if it's supported by the fellow board members, that they do acknowledge that this is final payment.
Yeah, you need that.
You need that.
Legals.
I'm required to do a project closeout. We're required to do a project closeout with every IDIQ that says we owe 0 to SAIC or LEDOs. So we need a project closeout checklist, whatever that means, documents, technical documentation, invoices, whatever is associated with that deliverables, then they must sign off, including the invoice payment, the final payment.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Any other board members? I do have a question. What are the 3 suppliers that we have that we're talking about?
It is Chain Electric, Pike Electric, and Greenstone.
I'm just, I'm torn now, because I've been through this 3 times. In my 18 years, I've been through this 3 times, and I really want to say something, but I don't want to say it because it's not, I've seen it happen with 3 different districts that went under, and I had to come in and stop that because you did not follow your own policy. If you follow your policy, this will not happen. And it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen on our side, and a supplier should not do work without the proper invoice to do the work, and we should not issue that until we have the funding available. I don't know how, I've seen it happen, and it just disappoints me because it should never happen. It should never go forth. You should never go over budget on this. You asked us before you go over budget, but not after you go over budget on this right here. So this is something that I've seen happen 3 times, and it just disappoints me to see this. I'm disappointed about it. Thank you. Okay. But thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your honesty, because I appreciate that. And letting us know up front, because we need to know things like that, because we can make better decisions when you give us good information. But in some way, we need this to come back to us, that this will not tell us it's not gonna happen again, but show us in the policies and procedures how this effectively should be operated, run, and it not happen. Because I can tell you several months ago when CPS hired a supplier to do some work in my neighborhood, and they came through my yard, and I told them, do not tear my irrigation pipes up. They tore up 10, cost me $282 that I had to pay for their work for a subcontractor. And I don't think that's right if any other customer go through that kind of work right there. And I did report it that same day. I reported ahead of time, and I asked everybody not to tear it up, and they did. But I'm just saying, that's not the kind of work that represents this company when we say people first and we take care of business. We don't do that. So I'm just disappointed, but I'm very delighted that you're telling us the truth, that we can make a good decision. So thank you for that. On behalf of that, I appreciate that.
I understand and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will move to our next agenda item, will be number 7. It will be consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we're pulling item number 7D is pulled. You gonna leave it?
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
it's gonna be brief.
Okay. Well, we're gonna leave 7D. Okay, so we'll have we have a motion for 7A, minutes of the special meeting held on 3/1/2021. Approval of consent agenda. B, minutes of regular board meeting held on 3/29/2021. C, payment to the city of San Antonio for March 2021. D, technology innovation and TI committee charter update. D, E, procurement items, we just went over them with general services, managed service provider. 2, general service overhead electric distribution service. 3, professional service system protection engineering service. And 4, general service fence and gate installation service. Do we have a motion?
I move approval with the suggestions that we just made relative to the overhead electric distribution services issue.
Yes.
Assuming those are implemented the way we discussed.
Mr. Kelly made a motion with the approval on the necessary changes that have been made to the consent agenda. Do we have a second?
No,
A second?
I'm sorry, I'm still learning.
No.
Still learning the Robert rules. I agree with him, but I wanted to have some feedback on another item.
Well, you have to do that after the second.
Okay,
Yes,
just wanna
second.
make
Are you gonna second it?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. We have a second by Ms. Gonzalez, and then now we open up for discussion.
I think we've discussed it.
Yeah, it's already been discussed. So any other discussions?
I have a question on we're approving a charter update for the Technology Innovation Committee. Would someone summarize what the changes are?
I can start, and then I can pass it to Paula. Mr. Steen, part of changing it really has a lot to do with the recent winter event. As you know, early on actually thanks to you, we developed the Technology and Innovation Committee. And then after the recent event, I initially thought our first big disruption was really going to be more of a cyber attack. I never envisioned it would be a winter event. So that being said, I think that one of the things that we would like to leverage the organization or the committee with would be to add resiliency. And so basically, it would really be focused on the ability to prepare and adapt changing conditions and withstand rapidly from disruptions. Those disruptions would include, of course, cyber attacks, accidents, or naturally occurring threats or incidents. And so it's really expanding the focus since we have so many things. Obviously, everything will come to all of us, but we felt that it would be important to expand the scope, and knowing that a lot of the future technology or the existing technology is more of a digital grid, new technologies. And so we figured that that would be a good way to have a sharper focus with such demands that we have right now. And Paula, you can add more to that.
I think you did an excellent job.
But Mr. Steen, please ask all the questions.
Resiliency is, of course, one of our value pillars. When we've surveyed our customers in the past, resiliency has pretty much kind of been at the bottom. But I think, again, to Vice Chair Gonzalez's point, we've got to relook at that whole view around the resiliency of our plants, the resiliency of our distribution system. And I do think, as I was listening to the Vice Chair talk, innovation is kind of embedded in the charter and in the activities that we do, but to put a finer point on resiliency, which will actually help with things like natural disasters. Do we have the right technologies, both in terms of production of energy and distribution of the energy in particular? But it was a good way to pull on the value system and be able to put it inside of a group that's already looking at, on the board level, what's happening with technology to make things better.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor. Okay, Mayor Newell.
Just one minor request. In the future, as we do bylaw changes, charter changes and all that, when we load up the backup documents, could you have staff include a redlined version as opposed to the final copy? It's a lot easier for us to.
Thank you, Mayor. If, on page 52, and looking at the minutes, I know on the board operating procedures, we had a 3-1, and it was 5 people voted. Shouldn't that be a 3-1-1? Mr. Kelly abstained? On page 52. At the very top, on the vote. But if you go underneath that, you will see that it says Trustee Steen voted against it and Trustee Kelly abstained. So wouldn't that be a 3-1-1? I don't know. I'm asking. 3-1-1. You have 1 abstain. 3-4, 1 against, and 1 abstain. There's 5 board members, right?
It's right
I'm
above the
just, I don't know, I'm just asking.
Carolyn, it's right above the section that says approval of consent items.
I mean, I think you're recording for and against. I guess it's a technical
Yes,
thing if you
we-
wanted to put
yeah, we could
another
say
one in there
for-
to represent abstention. Some people don't do that.
Yes, but we could certainly say that. There 4 people approved it. 1 board member did not. 1 board member abstained.
No, yes, 1 board member abstained. It says 3-4, 1 against, and 1 abstained. 4 didn't approve it.
Well, I'm gonna have to look. Let's see. Okay, yes, we could certainly say 3-1-1, which was approved, 3-1-1, 3-1-1 with Trustee Steen voting against, and trustee Kelly abstaining. Okay, sure.
So I wasn't going to bring it up, but I was looking at that same vote, and what I had expressed was that I thought, prepared to vote in favor of that motion, but I thought it was confusing, and I didn't see any reason that we had to vote at that meeting, that we could delay it to a future meeting. And so there was an explanation for my no vote. I don't,
Like to add that to that?
I would, and I think you could go back and find
have
it
that in my
in the minutes, and it's an explanation. It wasn't an outright no, it was because I was being, in a sense, put on the spot to vote on something that I wasn't clear on.
We can certainly add that.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Kelly, and we have a second by Ms. Gonzalez. Can we get a roll call, please, Michelle?
Yes, sir. Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
No.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mayor Nuremberg?
Aye.
Dr. Mackey?
Yes.
All right, there are 4 votes in favor and 1 against, and the motion passes.
Okay, we're started on the regular agenda, number 8, acceptance of annual audited.
I wanted, are we going to have, I'm sorry, can I get some clarification, Mr. Chairman? Are we having a vote also on the staff documentation?
Yes, we did. We did vote on that.
Okay, so, okay.
Ms. Gonzalez, that's what I was thinking, that you want to vote against one item on
Actually, it
on
was 2,
on 2 items.
right. And actually, it was no on
So you're,
one.
but what's happening is that your vote's going to be recorded and no vote on every item on the consent agenda, unless you want to try to change that.
Well, that's why I was asking the question, because I wanted to vote no on one item, and I wanted to delay one item for a month. That's why I asked the question if I could speak after. But that's,
Okay, well, Dr. Mackey, if you want to, we can go back and
I don't want to,
clarify the motions.
yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm a little confused.
You want to try to do that?
It's just a question of whether, what you want the record to reflect.
Right, I want the record to reflect no on the 3 million, but then I wanted to request an extension on the vote for the procurement for the staffing.
The MSP.
Right.
So one way might be to handle it is just to have your remarks be part of the minutes to explain I voted against the consent agenda, but I'm really focusing on these 2 things.
Yes. So I
Do that, thank you.
I have to repeat.
But all 4 go because there was a yes on all of them. So
Okay.
it's a yes on all of them.
So I'm going to say no to adding my own.
You just say no for you, but they all pass. Because we voted on all of them.
She's not saying they didn't pass. She just wants to explain why she voted no on the consent items. So that could be a paragraph following the vote
Yes, she could.
in the minutes.
She could just put that in the minutes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You just want them in the minutes, right, Ms. Gonzalez?
I guess.
Yes.
Well, not really, but I'll settle for that for
Okay.
now. I don't want to add more,
Okay.
but that's fine.
We'll make sure the minutes reflect that,
Okay.
written it down.
Okay, we are on item number 8, acceptance of annual audited financial statement, number 8 on the regular. If we would have her, this is Ms. Jody Dodson and Baker Tilly.
Paula, are they coming on?
Can you wait?
I think they're virtual, right?
We'll do it.
See the auditors.
Are we ready to have the auditors come in?
Hello, this is Adrian with CPS Energy. I will unmute Jody at this time.
Sure, yeah.
She's remote. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So this is Jody Dobson with Baker Tilly. Thank you so much for having me with you today. I believe you have our presentation in your handouts and as well as up on the screen. I did want to note that after the packets went out, it was noted that we had fiscal year 2020 still on the cover screen instead of 2021. And I definitely want to move forward to 2021. So I wanted to note that that's been corrected in the version that's on the screen in front of you. But really what we want to do today is just provide a brief overview of the audit process and results. So we can go to the next slide. As I said, we want to touch on an overview of the process, our required communications to all of you as those charged with governance, as well as touching on the internal control communications, and then answer any questions that you might have. So if we move to the next slide, our audit process, I would say in general, was very similar to prior years in that we start in the fall with our preliminary work and walking through your processes and controls and doing some initial testing. And then we are working again in March with the year-end final numbers and the bulk of our detailed testing, as well as testing of the actual financial statements or the report. But as we note here, you know, we had about 2,800 hours total of audit work, and that's small in comparison to the amount of time that your staff puts in. So we really do want to thank your staff and management team for all the work that they do in preparing for us and having support ready and things well organized. It does keep the process moving for a very extensive audit process. And I also wanted to highlight that this year our entire audit was conducted in a remote environment. Definitely not what we would call ideal, but in the same light, you know, both teams worked really hard to identify what questions might come up from that process, to plan ahead for over communicating. And I think it was very successful. Everything has been completed on time without issue. So really want to thank everyone's efforts in that as well. If we move on to the, I'm sorry, was there a question?
No.
Okay. So if we move to the next slide, as in the past, our audit was performed in accordance with the generally accepted auditing standards. This year, the audit was also performed in a compliance with governmental auditing standards because of some state funding that you received that required a state single audit. Didn't have a significant impact on the financial statements, but just something to note. As we walk through the audit, you know, the first thing I said that we do is understand your processes and your operations to identify where are these significant areas of risk that we want to focus on, and how do we want to test different areas? Is it something that we want to look at confirmations, testing a process, looking at detailed transactions, etc. So some of the key areas that we end up identified for CPS is the pension and OPEB funds, cash and investments, the city payment, unbilled revenues, revenue recognition. This year we did spend a little bit more time looking at the allowance for uncollectibles and the changes in process there to feel comfortable with that. The energy market accounting, asset retirement obligations, plant and service. It continues to be an area that has a lot of activity. Looking at the work that your audit services does, they assist with some of the inventory observations and test of controls for us, but we also understand what they do throughout the year to know if that identifies any new areas for us to look at. And then in the end, looking at an analytic review of the financial statements to make sure that things there have been properly tested and are explained, and also looking at the detailed footnotes within the financial statements to make sure that they are complete and accurate. So if we move to the next slide, the key item out of all of this that we issue is our opinion on the financial statements. It's a lot of work for what ultimately looks like a very short document from us, but that financial statement opinion is what we call an unmodified or a clean opinion. That's the highest level of assurance that we can give. And that lets you all and any outside readers know that these financial statements are a fair presentation in all material respects of the financial position and the results of operations for the organization. If we move to the next slide, we touch on internal controls. So as part of the audit, we are not intending to give you an opinion on internal controls, but we do need to understand your controls and processes to design our audit. And as a result of that, if anything comes to our attention that we feel is a material weakness meaning it could result in material misstatement to the financial statements, or a significant deficiency, which is something not quite to the level of a material misstatement or material weakness, but still requiring management attention. We're required to communicate these to you. And I'm happy to say that this year we have no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies to communicate. So moving to the next slide, there are a number of areas that we're required to communicate to those charged with governance on. The first being our responsibilities under the auditing standards. And really that comes down to all of the information in your financial statements is management's responsibility. It comes from your systems and is provided by management. Our responsibility is to design our audit such that we can issue our opinion on those financial statements. The scope and timing of the audit was as planned. There were no changes. There were no changes in accounting policies in this year's financial statements. We had a reprieve year from new GASBs to implement this year. There are accounting estimates involved in the financial statements. As part of our audit, we look at the methodology, significant inputs in those for consistency and accuracy as far as in relation to the financial statements as a whole, and there were no concerns identified. We look at compliance with laws and regulations as part of the audit, had nothing to communicate. As I said, we look at the financial statement disclosures to make sure they're complete and accurate and meeting all the requirements. No concerns there. So we move to the next slide. If there were any difficulties identified during the audit or during the process, we'd be required to communicate those to you. I have nothing to communicate. That's actually what a lot of these are, is I have nothing to communicate. There were no corrected or uncorrected misstatements. We had nothing where we're aware of management consulting with other accountants on the proper accounting for a unique transaction. No disagreements with management. We did not identify a going concern as part of the audit process. Management does provide us with a number of representations, and those are ultimately included in the final documents that you all receive. But they're really representing that they've provided us with the information, answered our questions, etc. As far as other findings or issues, the only item I want to highlight here is management has included in the financial statement footnotes a note on the subsequent event of the winter storm in February of 2021. While we understand that occurred after year end because it's occurred prior to the issuance of the financial statements, accounting standards would indicate and management agreed that it was important for the reader to have some information on that event. And so that's been just included in the footnotes to the financial statements. And then we work very hard to make sure that we're maintaining our independence such that we can issue your audit opinion. That's very important. So if we go to the next slide, that really summarizes our walkthrough of the overview. Again, I appreciate all the work from your team in getting ready for us and being available to us. The downside probably of being remote is that there's a little longer time period that we can ask questions of them. And so they were very accommodating to work with us on that. And with that, I guess I just ask if there are any questions.
Ms. Dobson, you'd like to express, you did a great job in presenting this to us and doing an audit of all our books. I know we were in the subcommittee and I really enjoyed listening to your report and all the things, and I thought it was great. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for any board members' questions or comments.
Dr. Mackey, do we have Ms. Garcia on the line?
I don't know that she was able to join today. She and several other members of the team were on the line with the audit committee last week.
Pardon me? Wouldn't that be, shouldn't we have her for this report to the full board? Dobson, and also in the packet we have, I know you gave us, we don't have your letter, but would you remind me of the language? There's, in the typical letter, there's what I would call maybe disclaimer language related to internal controls. What's the standard language in your letter?
Yeah, so what the audit standards require is that we understand the internal controls to design our audit process and to feel comfortable issuing our opinion. And so we do walk through several of the processes and internal controls, but because we are not looking at every aspect of processes and controls throughout the entire organization, we're not engaged to give an opinion on those internal controls.
And what's the language that you use?
In the required communications, I think the language is that we did not identify a material weakness. However, that doesn't mean that there's something that exists in an area that we didn't look at. I think that's really the catch, is that if there's an area we did not look at, we can't speak to that.
Okay, I don't want to belabor it, but this is not an audit of our internal controls, and I just wanted to remind everyone that we did do an internal controls audit for the PFC. I think it was the first time in 10 years that we'd done, I mean, it was the only time we'd done it, but 10 years had passed, and I think that was a good and worthwhile exercise we went through. And it's not so much from you, Ms. Dobson, but I wanted to ask Paul Williams, are we still on track to do an internal controls audit for CPS Energy?
Yes, it is going to happen, though, once we get through the RFP, because to do one now at the end of the contract that we have doesn't give us a whole lot of time to get that value out of it. So when we do the next RFP, which will start after this, then we'll include that.
And when's the last time CPS Energy had an internal controls audit?
Have not.
Ever had one in the history of the company? Okay.
Mr. Steen, if I could.
Mr. Gold.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gold, before we start and get into it, can we take a 5-minute break before you start? We'd like to take a 5-minute break. I always thought it's a different one. We're getting ready to start another presentation.
Oh, I see. It's a different presentation, or
No.
just to answer Mr. Steen's?
No, I was here to answer Mr. Steen's question about,
Yeah, please answer his question and then I'm going to.
Okay.
yes, Mr. Steen, your question about the PFC. The audit that is going to be conducted on the PFC will be an internal controls audit for fiscal 2021. That's happening. That'll be starting here probably in the next week or so.
He was asking about CPS Energy.
Okay, so we haven't had an internal controls audit for the PFC. I thought we'd completed one.
We completed a PFC internal controls 2 years ago, and we're doing another one this year.
Oh, we're doing another one
For the PFC.
for the PFC.
Yes, sir.
But what's our timeline for doing one for CPS Energy?
We do not have a timeline for that, sir.
Well, I don't
Included
want-
in the RFP.
Yes, it's included, yes. It'll be part of the
He
RFP.
just doesn't know who it is because we haven't done the RFP.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes, one quick question while you're here. The after audit footnote about the February freeze, can you give me some description of, is it going to characterize that as a materially adverse factor going forward, or is it just something that you're asking the reader to take note of? Or can you give me some idea of the language that is being used with that after audit item?
It's an awareness item, sir, and the information that's being provided is consistent with the material event notices that we have posted on the EMA website for investors, as well as the information that was provided in the recent official statements. So it is very similar to that. It's awareness information for the reader.
So if an investor took note of that and was concerned about it, where would he go to get some idea as to the magnitude of that? Would he go to our website and drill down? Or where could an investor, I guess where I'm coming from, Mr. Gold, is that anytime I read a financial statement and I see a material after the audit footnote, that gets my attention. And obviously, February's event was material. So if an investor reads that and they want to drill down, do we have a provision within the notes as to how they can drill down, or how do they go about doing that?
Their investors have access to the material events notices that have been posted on the EMA website. We posted 3 material event notices after the event and have provided very detailed information about our estimates and other facts related to the event. And that is on the EMA website. It's the Municipal Securities Reporting Board.
Okay, do you think the footnote needs to direct a reader to our website, or do you think that should just be at their own discretion?
It should be to Emma's website.
Pardon me?
Yeah, it's
I would recommend
No, but
that,
I'm talking about the audit report itself, if I'm looking at the audit report.
well, the audit report, in my opinion, should be our website, but any material notices regarding the winter storm should go to Emma, in my opinion.
Yes, sir. The information is available. I mean, if we can work to make sure that the investors and other readers are aware of what's available on the EMA
What I'm driving at is that I have seen financial statements that have an after-audit materially impactful statement. And in a number of instances, it had says, as a part of the footnote, for additional information, go to blank. And I'm asking, did we say that, or should we say that, if we haven't said it?
I'm sure, sir, that we could add that one
I
statement.
think we should, Mr.
We can
Kevin.
Does say it?
No, I don't think it says they should go visit. It's a note to answer your question. It's just a note, a footnote, right?
Right, but right now, it's just a footnote.
Right, but
saying
what you're
there's a-
recommending is that footnote that redirect individuals to learn more, whether it's a
That's
citizen
what
or
I'm
an
saying.
investor.
I have seen footnotes that tell you how to go drill down.
I guess
I'm asking if this one does that, and if it doesn't, should it?
I don't believe that it does, sir, but we can work with.
I don't believe it would hurt. I would recommend if
Yes,
that's.
Yeah, I think
But
I'd
we'll-
look into that.
We can work with Baker Tilly.
And what we can do, Gary, is just have it go to wherever in the landing page in our website where it's appropriate, and then just have a third-party link to Emma. And that way it's just at our website.
Yes, ma'am.
That would be my recommendation. That's up to y'all.
I agree.
So I would, before we leave this idea of the internal controls audit, just a question, are we on track to have that done?
We have to put it in part of the RFP process. We're on track to do that. So we started after this audit is done, and Gary and Audit Services have been planning to get the audit launched after that. So we're just getting started on the new audit engagement, and it'll be part of that.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Dobson, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Could you comment on that in terms of the organizations that you audit, those organizations having internal control audits done on a periodic basis? Can you give us some context to that?
I think it is very rare for governmental entities to go through that exercise. That said, those that receive grant funding, federal funding on a regular basis may be going through that specific to those programs, but not in an entity-wide level.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. If we could take a 5-minute break, we have a board member who'd like to take a 5-minute break.
Dr. Mackey, we do need to have a motion to accept the annual audited financial.
So move.
We got a motion by Mr. Steen. We have a second?
Second,
Second
trustee
by
Gonzalez.
Trustee Gonzalez. We have a roll call?
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mayor Nuremberg?
Aye.
Dr. Mackey?
Aye.
So by the way, I guess we could go back to the way we used to vote, since she can see how we're voting, instead of calling the roll.
I don't understand what you're talking about.
Well, we're calling the roll. We did that because we were doing the remote meetings, but now that she could see, you could call a vote, and she could see who voted aye and who voted nay. Oh, yes, that's right. On a voice vote.
Well, yeah, until we get back into it, that's fine, making sure that we get everybody documented.
Sure, I think we just kept it because of the transitional. We kept a few things that we had before, but really good point. So we'll look at streamlining it further.
Thank you. Any other questions before we take a 5-minute break? Ms. Gonzalez, you want to, okay, take a 5-minute break.
Bathroom is right that way.
continued efforts to help our customers.
Yes, sir, they are ready to go.
Good afternoon. So Rudy and I this afternoon will be talking about the first part of our financial plan, and that's really to cover what we've been doing to continue to help our customers, as well as what the financial implications are. So you'll see here our objectives and takeaways, and it's really just been how have we lived people first during COVID-19, as well as how we've helped support and be here for our customers. We'll talk through how we're continuing to monitor the landscape, both internal and external, and then what those financial implications are. And you'll see the agenda here matches kind of what I just spoke about. Here for our guiding pillars and our foundation, the main focus for our presentation will really be honing in on customer affordability as well as maintaining the financial responsibility foundation. So to start, it's about living people first. And during COVID-19, it was important for us to make sure that we were still out in the community, still available for customers, but at the same time keeping employees and customers safe. So people first looked a little bit different, and it sounded a little bit different through the past year and going into this year. And you can see here the pictures of us having screening stations at our walk-ins, but we continue to be available for our customers. We also pivoted some of our employees to make outbound phone calls and really find ways to connect with the community and see how we can help. It was about understanding and finding ways for our customers to recover. We know through customers' recovery and our community's recovery, that's what's going to ultimately help us to recover. So a little bit more about our customer outreach program. You heard us talk about the customer outreach resource effort that we did, and that's the number of customers that we've reached out to, and really it was about doing things a little bit differently in terms of connecting with them from an empathetic perspective, but also saying, you know, how are you? How are you doing through all of this? We're here for you, and we really do care, so tell us what's going on and let us help you find some resources that might help with whatever your circumstance is. We listen to each customer individually, and then we talk through not just utility assistance, but we also helped identify, customers would say things like, you know what, unfortunately, I just lost a family member to COVID, and so we would help find financial assistance for burial cost, or, you know what, I just don't know how I'm going to pay rent, so we'd help connect them with the different rent services out there. It really was just about listening to customers, and we have one of the quotes up here from our customers, but overall, what we heard is that it was making a difference for both our employees and our customers to connect and find ways to help them. Next, you'll see some of the support options that we have available for our customers, and highlighted some of the key ones. We have for customers who self-identify as senior citizens or needing some type of critical care, they can enroll into billing programs that will provide them with additional time to pay their bills. We also have assistance programs like REAP for income-qualified customers who may need some additional support on their monthly bills, as well as the new CPS Energy Angels that we launched, which allows for customers to pay it forward. So if they know a specific family in need, they can call us up and we can help them make a payment on that other customer's behalf. In addition to that, we have a variety of payment support options. So customers can call us up and say, hey, I need a couple extra months to pay my bill, and we provide flexible installment plans for them. We'll meet them where they're at. If they need an additional month, we'll help set up an installment plan for that. Some customers don't need additional months, they just need a few more days, and so we also set up payment options to extend their due date and give them the time that they tell us they need. But overall, it's just about listening to customers. They can go online, call us, or come to our walk-in centers, and we'll find whatever we can and whatever resources and support and options that we have to fit their individual needs. This next slide is really about our employees and everything that they've done to show their resiliency. Our employees really have stepped up to support everything for the flexible path and the flexible path power bundle. We had the headquarters move here during the pandemic, and it was about staying safe, like I mentioned, to not just be available for our customers, but we had some key audits, like through NERC or with the Railroad Commission, that our employees had to help get us through. And so on top of everything else that we all had to deal with externally, these are just some of the internal components and challenges that our employees faced. And through all of this, they were still available for our customers and our community. And then here you'll see the pathway that we've taken. Shortly after the pandemic, we did, in March of last year, suspend disconnects, and as you know, we began waiving our late fees. Then right after that, in June, we kicked off that core outreach program that I had mentioned. And as of the end of this March, we had called over 69,000 customers and identified over $21 million in assistance for our customers. And that's through things like REAP or the different agency partners that we have. So that really brings us to where we're at today, to have a decision point on, and that discussion on reinstituting disconnects and how and when might be the right time. So with that, I'll hand it over to Rudy Garza to talk through our landscape as well as the financial implications.
Thank you, Deanna, and thank you very much for having me here today to all the board members. So Deanna covered, when we're monitoring the landscape, thinking about how to proceed forward in our return to normal operations as it relates to disconnects, we really look at this from two perspectives. We look at it from the perspective Deanna just talked about, helping our customers, and then analyzing all the external factors that help us know that we're making a good decision. What does the impacts of COVID look like on our community? What do our economic indicators look like? And what are the financial impacts to the company? And so really, it's a combination of our customer view and all those factors that will help us make a good decision as we move forward. In terms of health and economic inputs, we really overlaid here the impact of COVID-19 to the San Antonio community. And as you can see, it's been very cyclical, but it certainly is trending in the right direction. All the good work that the mayor and our county judge and the community has done to get folks vaccinated and to do the things that we need to do to socially distance and to pay attention to those health indicators really has moved the COVID impacts and trends in the right direction. And then you overlay on top of that the economic indicators, and primarily here we've shown the economic indicator related to unemployment. But certainly, when you talk to a lot of small businesses today, there are a lot of small businesses that are starting to have trouble finding employees because employees are slowly but surely going back to work, specifically in the restaurant and our hotel industry. They're really having trouble finding employees to come back to work. So when you stack both of these on top of one another, certainly our community is trending in a better direction than we've seen over the last 12 months. Then we look at industry trends related to disconnects, and there are really two locations in Texas that have yet to determine when we're going to reinstitute disconnects. But most of the utilities, the public power utilities, the co-ops in our general vicinity have either never stopped disconnecting customers, have gone back to disconnecting customers, or have announced that they're going to start disconnecting customers again. So this is one of the just industry benchmarks that we've done to try to make sure that we understand what's happening around us. We start looking at some of the financial implications to CPS Energy, and in this on this particular slide, we show just overall customers, account status, and associated dollar amounts. So as you can see, 57% of our customers, roughly $136 million are current. We've got 28%, $65 million that are at least 30 days past due, and we've got another 15% or $36 million, roughly 83,000 customers that would be eligible for disconnect today if we were disconnecting. So this is one of the financial views that we wanted to show our Board of Trustees today. If we break those numbers down into residential and commercial, and this is by revenue, not necessarily by customer count, the amount of revenue from a residential standpoint, we're showing that 6% of revenue is over 30 days past due for residential customers, and roughly 19% or $17 million is 30 days past due from a commercial standpoint. We also wanted to show you a look that just showed the average balances and how they have grown since the start of the pandemic. And as you can see here, I'll just give you the 2 bullet points from beginning and end. We've got $268 is what the customers owed us on average March of 20. And we are now up to $599 in March of 2021. So the longer that we go without disconnecting customers, the higher we expect this balance to continue to grow. So as we move forward, there are a few things that we wanted to talk to the board about with regard to just being creative about how we think about these decision points looking ahead. Certainly, we continue to work with our city and county partners to have access to federal funds. Paula has said many times in the past, we don't get direct allocation of CARES funding from the federal government. So we have to work with our governmental partners who do get access to those funds to work on programs that will help our customers pay down some of these balances. As Deanna talked about earlier, we have found customers somewhere in the neighborhood of $22 million of assistance up to now. We cannot turn a switch on tomorrow and just start disconnecting customers again. We're going to have to phase in the approach over time. And so how we think about those phases, who do you start with? Roughly of the 73,000 customers or so that we have tried to call, we have been in contact with over 60% of those customers, which means there's 40% of customers we've tried to contact that just will not connect with us. And so we really want to make sure that anybody, as we move forward, who has an opportunity to connect with us, we'll help you, put you on payment plans. There's no reason for customers to get disconnected if they'll just make contact with us. And so there will be an approach we talk about that will include phases of bringing our operations back into normal operations as it relates to disconnects. We've got to continue communicating not only about programs and services, but also about when we might intend to start disconnecting again and give customers as much advance notice as we possibly can, and then tell them what our approach is going to be. We want to be transparent with our customers about what to expect once we start to begin moving in that direction. And then, as Deanna also mentioned, we will continue promoting our REAP program, which is the best way for customers to help our communities to donate to REAP. And then if you've got a cousin or an aunt or uncle or a friend that you want to directly help, we did begin the Energy Angels program, which allows for customer-to-customer assistance, which we feel is a great step in the right direction. And with that, I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
You have any questions, please?
Thank you, Mr. Garza. Describe the disconnect process
So, well,
as it relates to an individual.
so it depends on whether or not you're a residential or commercial customer. You know, typically, we will give customers, from the time you get notice that you're past due to the time we disconnect, it's about 45 days, or give or take. And so, you know, we constantly reinforce how you avoid getting disconnect. So it's not like you get a disconnect notice, you get you're turned off the next day.
How are you reinforcing that?
Well, they will get, they'll get a letter, and then they will likely get multiple phone calls prior to getting disconnected. So we do everything we can to reach out to them to try to set something up in terms of assistance, you know, before we get to that deadline where we have to disconnect them.
So of course, I'm focusing on the residential.
Yes, sir.
The commercial's a little bit different. It
is a little bit.
True? You can be a little bit sterner with the commercial.
Yeah, well, and Deanna, you may have, Deanna walked outside, but our commercial process, just the process we go through to contact them might be a little bit different, but we really do, you know, focus on both. I mean, we have different processes, we have different groups that reach out to different aspects of our customer base. And so, you know, but we do have specific outreach to both residential and commercial, yes, sir.
And then once someone's confronted with that, how do our customers react? Do most of them figure out a way to avoid disconnection? Is that
a good percentage of them will typically call you and make arrangements within 2 or 3 days. So we do get a direct reaction from customers when they get disconnected. Yes, sir.
And then the other thing I was wondering about is you don't disconnect during part of the summer. Is that
That's correct.
What's the typical period?
Usually in extreme weather months like August, for instance, when it's 100 degrees consistently, we will stop our disconnection process when we're expecting the temperature to hit 100 degrees.
Okay, so we're talking about this, but we're about to hit the summer months.
That's correct.
But it's usually August?
It's usually the August month, sometimes the end of July. Basically, when we see that it's going to be 100 degrees, we'll prepare to suspend disconnects to match the weather. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Gonzalez?
So the potential in 30 days would be 172 million balance of disconnects?
The number of eligible customers that are eligible for disconnect today is around $36 million, is what's past due.
Okay, so
I mean, which is what's eligible for disconnect. The amount past due is closer to the $173 million that you mentioned.
okay. My other question is, who are our partners that we're working with to be creative?
Well, we have probably a list of over 20 partners across the community that we work with. Any social service agency that offers customers services of all kinds, whether it be housing, utility assistance, water assistance. We have a full list of community organizations that we work with, including our partners at the city and county. So anybody that offers services, we've got pretty good connections with, and we will get them the assistance that they need. And they'll funnel customers to us for REAP assistance when they identify somebody who's eligible.
Can you elaborate more on the federal partners or maybe county partners? When you say county, are we talking about Commissioner's Court? And are you saying partners as in the city?
It's, yes, ma'am, and it's, we've got a list we can send you of all the county
I
partners.
don't think I need a list. I was just curious. So can I ask a question to the mayor? So how are we working together? It's my understanding we're expecting federal funds that potentially, right, could be used under affordable housing, potentially could be used for utilities?
So with regard to the rescue plan, we're still waiting for the rules and regulations on that. We do expect some additional housing assistance, but that's just what Eric and I were talking about. I don't know if you want to finish your comments, because
Well, no, I was just curious about it, because one of my suggestions would be, if there's an opportunity to do so, if we could maybe leverage REAP, the program for that. And if so, is there any policy or changes that would need to be considered if it's doable through that program?
We made some bylaw changes and process changes so that any money that came through on the CARES package would be easier to access for our customers. So we did do that.
Is that this separate program from the county, or is the county working with y'all? Is that two separate asks?
You want to answer that one, Eric?
It is.
Sorry, Eric, I just want to know, because if I need to go ask, I'm going to go ask. I don't want to be creative. I want to be aggressive about it.
Well, I think part of this is making sure that you're targeted in the right direction.
I agree.
Number one, the REAP program, and I know Paula, the CPS, had attempted to gather towards the end of the year with both the city and the county. The city, we spent all of our Corona relief funds on time in accordance with the federal rules. So at that point, as Paula was trying to establish that meeting, we had no more funding. As the mayor mentioned, we are waiting for rules and eligibility of the American Relief Fund Act. That money may or may not, depending on the eligibility, could be utilized for that. I would think that we probably need to see where all the pieces are at on the table. REAP could be a component of that, but that would require some coordination with the county and the use of their funds.
Clarifying that.
Yes, Mayor.
No, if I could just take a step back for a minute, this whole pandemic and these numbers, this data that you shared, Rudy, which is very helpful, has reminded us all that housing is more than just your rent payment or your mortgage payment. It's a lot more than that for a lot of folks. And you can see, as those numbers have been creeping up for people, that the ability to keep a roof over their heads in this pandemic and the assistance we're providing to people goes beyond just, again, the rent or mortgage assistance. I was asking Eric for how much we have already, through the Emergency Housing Assistance Program, provided for utility relief, which is reflected in these numbers, and it's a little over $11 million. To date, the city's program has helped over 83,000 families avoid being, knocked out of their homes. And in doing so, also keeping the entire stream from finance to tenant whole. So they're also not getting a big bill due at the end of the day. Everybody's whole in the process. But 83,000 families is interesting because that's also almost the same number of families that are more than 30 days or more than 60 days over in their payments. So what I would suggest is we wait for the rules and regs on the American Rescue Plan, as well as additional specific housing relief that we expect from the federal government that may go above and beyond what's in the rescue plan. The other thing is we've all been reading about this $1 billion state housing relief program, of which they've maybe approved 100 or so applications. 250 applications so far. There's $1 billion in federal relief sitting at the state that is quote-unquote housing to keep people in homes. This is not the only utility in the state that's dealing with these issues, and it's also not the only type of utility. We're also facing the same issue over at SAWS. So perhaps we need to work together here locally with the county to identify the pockets of revenue that are quote-unquote housing to help make sure that people don't get a bill that's forcing them out. But we also communicate with our delegation about maybe rewriting some of the eligibility criteria on the state housing program to loosen up some of those dollars to actually be used for utility assistance. Because again, that's not just a Bexar County issue, that's happening all across the state. El Paso needs assistance as well. So we can start communicating with our folks over there immediately about that.
Okay.
I do have another comment. My other concern is, I'm a small business owner, and if you really look at who's paying their bills, it's business. And we need to be careful too. Not everybody was eligible for the PPP loan. And so small business, in my case, we're not generating $25 million a year. I mean, we're small. And I know I'm paying my bills. One, it's my obligation as a trustee, plus we don't want to have bad credit. So it's another thing that we need to consider, that we cannot allow still small business to carry the whole weight when a lot of us are also struggling. So just be mindful of whatever we can do, that if you look at these numbers, the business community is being impacted by where we stand. The other question I had is, can we have a report from Kathy Garcia, I believe, in the future for governmental affairs, and where we're at and what is our activity at the state level, to see where we can maybe have a bigger impact or strategize a little bit more? I know some of you on the board have a better network than I do at a state level, but whatever we can do, I would appreciate that as well.
Mayor?
The only thing I'd add is I appreciate the pause and the reflection on the data. That's exactly why this will allow us to identify some new sources of revenue, and also not unnecessarily raise the blood pressure of folks who've already been struggling through this entire year. So I think that is a good signal for folks that we're not rushing to this. We're going to understand the impact, the data, the financial impact as well, and we'll move forward together as a community.
Thank you, Mayor.
So I would like for our CEO to weigh in. I know you've made a lot of statements about this, but what's your current thinking on this? And of course, it's trying to balance this, what the mayor's talking about is the hardship on families and wanting to be understanding and help these families, but then the other side of it is financial stress on the company, which we as trustees have to be concerned about. What's your thinking? How are you dealing with that?
Well, it's an extremely fine balance. I think we've taken the perspective that, we've served this community for so long. These are our customers that we truly care about, and we do understand that their ability to get back to a more viable existence is really important to the strength of our whole economy. So it hasn't been with a lot of thought about helping them. And as Rudy explained, we started casework. That's not what utilities typically do. They don't do casework, but we started casework well before the pandemic. And so Deanna and Rudy have a view where I've gone out with them, where they go out and try to help customers get everything from assistance with their families and counseling to food to utility assistance. So this is a really meaningful perspective for us. We think we've doubled down on our community by being helpful and trying to be patient. Not many utilities have an outbound call avenue. They really don't. We are one of the very few that have really been talking to customers and found that to be helpful. If we had not done that, I think our numbers would be even higher. But we do need to get back, sir, to your point of balancing it all and being thoughtful and taking in the information that is here. We have wanted to get more direct federal assistance, but utilities have not qualified for that to come to us directly. But we have been spending time with elected officials at the federal level and at the state level, but it just, for one reason or another, hasn't really turned in fruition. We've gotten some money from the city and the county, and to that we're very appreciative, but by far the need in our community is much bigger than this. And so I take the mayor's commentary and the city manager's commentary. We will lean into it further, but we ultimately do have to find a way to balance that out. We do need to get back to normal operations. Even before the pandemic, we worked with our customers intensely. The payment plan was one of the biggest, and still is, one of the biggest programs that we have to help customers through their hard and difficult times. And that has worked. It has been a good balance. So we're going to be as thoughtful as possible. We've got to get back to a normal, but there are no, we don't have any other funds to get this from. And we're holding on our balance sheet again, but it is really being difficult to keep it all in balance. We're going to have to ultimately start the disconnects again. But be careful, to your point, we'll be back in the middle of summer, and then we'll have to still be thoughtful and give our customers as much grace as possible.
Kelly, you had anything?
This will be my last comment, but first of all, Paula, thank you. I know it hasn't been easy, or for anybody who works for CPS at this last couple of months, but I will say, like, for example, not having the appropriate financial, contract finance and management controls, even though it's $3 million, like, that's an example of if people that run departments at CPS don't understand what a big job they have, that was $3 million that we could have used to offset disconnects. So I just want to make it a point that as a CEO myself, it's almost impossible sometimes to oversee every second, every moment, every hour of every decision your employee makes, but I want them to understand there are consequences to their daily decision-making that affects the CEO. And so I want to make sure that they understand that, mistakes happen every once in a while, but we cannot afford any costly mistakes within this organization. We have some big problems to address. Environmental things that happen beyond our control, but things that we can control is how we manage and run this organization.
Thank you.
Absolutely agree.
Thank you. That's it, Mr.
Thank you.
Rudy Garza. If we could bring in the next one, Ms. Julie Johnson. Ms. Gary Gold and Ms. Julie Johnson.
Good afternoon. I'm here to introduce Julie Johnson. She is going to cover the second part of the presentation to discuss our financial plan. She's going to be looking at the broader landscape and some of the challenges, kind of setting the foundation. And our plan is next month to come back to the board with parts 3 and 4 of our financial plan, which include our budget for fiscal year 22. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie Johnson.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. As Gary mentioned, I will be walking you through part 2 of today's presentation, which focuses on our new landscape and the challenges that have been considered in our fiscal year 22 financial plan. This way? Got it. Okay, so first, the objectives and takeaways of today's presentation. We'll highlight the current financial landscape, and then we'll talk about the actions we are taking. So for our agenda, we'll talk about who we are and our resilience, and then we'll jump right into our new landscape discussion, which is made up of 3 components: maintaining operations and support, our growth, pandemic, and then the Winter Storm Uri. And then we'll finish up with a conversation on what's next. So this slide highlights CPS Energy and the strength of our company. We have 161 years of history backed by 3,000 employees, a strong and diverse customer base, strong financials, and strong credit ratings. So on this slide, we present our guiding pillars. This is just a reminder that we balance these guiding pillars, and all our business decisions are based on a foundation of financial responsibility. You saw this slide a little bit earlier. It just represents a year in review. And as we look back at fiscal year 2021 and some of the challenges that we faced and overcame, it's just a great example of how resilient our people are. So here we are now with a year like fiscal year 2021 under our belts, and fiscal year 22 is already not shaping up to be a typical budget year. We are faced with customer growth and service level expectations. And in addition to the continuing impacts of COVID, we now have Winter Storm Uri costs to contend with. We also don't anticipate the high wholesale revenues that we've experienced in past years. So it's a combination of all of these factors that are shifting our landscape and creating new challenges. So this slide shows the 3 key challenges that are adding the pressures to our financial plan. And I'll be covering each one of these in detail in the next few slides. But before we leave this, I just wanted to emphasize that as we navigate this new landscape, affordability is going to be a primary focus as we determine the impact of these items on customer bills. So jumping into maintaining operations. So we deliver value to the community through our essential services. Our ability to provide these services is our priority. And on this slide, we show just a few of the recognitions that we've received. But our main takeaway here is that our goal is to continue to provide this high level of customer service to our community. So while the pandemic and Winter Storm Uri continue to create challenges, San Antonio continues to grow, and that population growth will impact our community in many ways. With 1.1 million more people expected by the year 2040, accommodating that growth in our community will be a priority. But however, with that will come additional financial pressures. Okay, so this slide shows the trend of electric retail revenue in our forecast. As anticipated due to COVID, we saw a 2.2% decrease in total system sales in fiscal year 2021. And although we reported an increase in residential sales due to people working from home and students remote learning, that increase was offset by a decline in other sectors such as churches and hotel and food services. So as a result, our electric forecast for fiscal year 22 and 23, as shown in the blue bars, it assumes a similar 2% decrease in total volumes in comparison to our previous plan for those same years, which is in the orange bars. So the main takeaway here is that when we look at the blue bars, we still anticipate growth in fiscal year 22 and 23 in comparison to 2021. However, that growth is not at the same level that we've seen in the past. So an additional challenge to our fiscal year 22 plan is lower wholesale revenues. We are seeing less pressures on the ERCOT reserve margin due to larger volumes of renewables. This drives lower prices, which leads to lower wholesale revenues. And as you've heard us say before, wholesale revenues are used to reduce the amount to be recovered from customers. Without this offset, this adds additional pressure to our residential customers. So this is a view of the cyclical nature of wholesale. We've had some really good years in fiscal year 19 and 20. However, we did see a decline in fiscal year 2021, mainly driven by higher renewables and natural gas. And that trend is expected to continue into fiscal year 22 and 23. Main point here is that with wholesale revenues, we are not assured success every year. So with the pandemic still looming and the impacts of Winter Storm Uri, we expect fiscal year 22 to be a very financially challenging year. In response to that financial pressure, we have implemented a short-term strategy of prioritization and cost control. So we continue to prioritize our essential services while deferring projects wherever we can. We have also implemented some temporary mitigations, including strategic hiring freeze and suspension of merit, wage increase, and the employee incentive plan. And we'll continue to search for state and local COVID-19 funding, but unfortunately, that has been limited up to this point. And so although we've kept fiscal year 22 non-fuel O&M relatively flat, we're still seeing some underlying drivers that make this a very challenging year. So this slide demonstrates that we've accommodated growth efficiently into our non-fuel O&M. The increase we see here from year to year is due to a second refueling outage at STP, which is a planned event. So moving on to the pandemic. So in addition to impacting our sales, COVID has impacted our receivables. And as these graphics depict, this is not just a local issue, as similar impacts have been felt globally. So as we've continued working with our customers during the pandemic, we have seen our past due customer balances grow. This chart shows June of 2020 through March 2021 balances. So the green shading within the bar are current receivables. And the blue shading, those are just different variations of past due balances. So the past due balances have been growing at an average of $7 million per month since the beginning of the summer. And the total past due balances, again, the blue part of the bar, they're becoming a larger percentage of our total customer receivables. We are currently at 42% in comparison to 25% in the prior year. So as we saw in the slide before, the increase in past due balances leads to bad debt write-offs. This has introduced now an uncertainty of recovery for the services that we provide, and this is a direct impact to our cash flow. Our bad debt projection, which typically is less than 1%, it is now anticipated to be over 2% of retail revenue in fiscal year 22. So because we are a cost recovery business, this situation is driving financial pressures. And so when some customers do not pay, others must pay to maintain stability. This is a slide that Deanna presented, and she did a really good job in describing some of these programs. Same message here. We will continue to support our customers by connecting them with bill assistance resources. And now Winter Storm Uri. So you've seen this slide before, and we use it to emphasize just the extreme cold weather that we experienced. We sustained below freezing temperatures for 5 days in San Antonio, and that broke a record that was previously set in 1959. Now, of course, the situation led to high demand for energy and natural gas. So here's a summary of our best estimate of the total impact of this event. On the table on this slide, you'll see that natural gas maximum estimated cost is $670 million, while purchase power in ERCOT is $365 million. So the total maximum cost is a little over $1 billion. So as we've reported, we are continuing to pursue multiple options to reduce these costs to a justified and legitimate level. And also we will continue to follow prudent business practices, but we will continue to work on protecting our customers. So in summary, our financial plan for fiscal year '22 is facing some key challenges. Some of these financial pressures we have not seen before. As we discussed, San Antonio growth, plus the projected decline in wholesale revenues and to some degree in retail revenues also, that's impacting our ability to maintain our normal operations. We're also facing challenges from the pandemic and Winter Storm Uri. So the financial services team is working to update the financial plan to ensure sustainability. And again, another reminder is that as we navigate this new landscape, affordability is going to be a primary focus. So what's next? So we'll continue helping our customers through these challenging times. We will also continue protecting our customers as we fight to reduce Winter Storm Uri costs. And then in May, we'll be back to review the sustainability approach and the budget with the board. And as always, we'll keep you updated through this process. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Ms. Johnson?
Well, yes, I do have some comments. First, I want to thank you for the great presentation. That's really, really good information. And I kind of want to tie this in with one of your last bullets about continue helping customers, and we definitely want to do that. But we can't help customers if we don't stay in business. And if you really want to know how this company is doing, you need to look at the financials very, very carefully. And I know you do that. I know Gary does that. And of course, our CEO is a CPA. But we're going to have to face the reality that there is a limit to what this company can do. Let me go back and review a second something that we lose sight of. This company, when we talk to our customers, want two things out of us: affordable energy, reliable energy. That's what they want. They've said it over and over and over in surveys. We are doing that in spades. If you take a look at the facts, we have the lowest customer rates of any utility in the state of Texas and among the lowest in the country. So we're giving them what they want, affordable rates. Secondly, if you're talking about reliability, we have one of the highest reliability factors in the country and the top decile. And if you'll talk to the folks at the Economic Development Foundation, they will tell you that one of the strongest things in their quiver of arrows is the strength of CPS Energy and selling new companies on coming to San Antonio. So we have this marvelous company. And if you compare that to, say, HEB, and HEB says we have the lowest prices available. Yep, they do. And they have great services. Yep, they do. Well, guess what? We do the same thing. But here's something HEB doesn't do, and nobody else does. We, this one company, funds 30% of the general budget of the city of San Antonio. Imagine that we are providing the lowest utility rates of any major city. We're providing the highest service level possible, the strongest reliability, and oh, by the way, 30% of the city budget comes from this one company. If we didn't do that, how would you fund it? If this company didn't exist, how would you fund that 30%? You'd either have to increase taxes dramatically. Incidentally, our budget, what we pay, is almost equal to the total real estate taxes collected each year by the city of San Antonio. So you could double your real estate taxes, and that would offset what we're paying. Or you could take your sales taxes and city fees to some astronomical number. We get zero credit for that, guys. Zero credit. When I talk to my colleagues in the business community and I tell them this, their eyes get this, but you're kidding. They don't have a clue. what we're doing. And so, number one, we're not telling our story. But number two, if you'll start looking at your numbers, if you'll look at our cash numbers from last year, they're off $80 million. That's significant. If you look at our accounts receivable, they're up $150 million. And they're not nearly as good as they used to be. You just said 46% of them now are at risk, as opposed to 25% in the past. So our accounts receivable are very, very scary. They're over $300 million now, whereas in the past they averaged $150 million. They now represent 10% of our net worth, whereas in the past they represented 5% or less. This company is being chewed to death, guys. Our bad debt ratio is up 5 times, 5x, in 1 year. Yeah, we've had a pandemic. Even in the pandemic, we gave the city $330 million. February, we gave them $22 million of this year. Last month, we gave them $27 million. That makes REAP and all this other stuff look like petty change, what we're giving to the city. So guys, we have got to find somebody else to help us carry this load. We have not had a rate increase. We've had one rate increase in 11 years. That was 7 years ago, and it was 4.5%. Can HEB say that? No. Can anybody else say that? Probably not. We get zero credit. Every time we have our, quote, citizens to be heard, we're lambasted for being a bad company. That sickens me. This is a great company, and it's doing a great job, but it is being taken down a piece at a time. And if we don't watch it, guys, the goose that's been laying the golden egg for this city for 78 years and has dividended $8 billion back to this city is going to start limping off the stage. So I admire what you're doing and from your work because you're telling the story. But we better start getting some help from somebody else. I don't know who it is. I don't know how it works. I came from a poor family. We figured it out. My dad had 3 jobs. My wife had 2 jobs. I got my first job when I was 11 years old, and I've worked ever since. We figured it out. Let some more people figure it out, okay? Or let's get some help from somebody else. Just something to think about.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Anyone else? Any more questions, comments? Before we convene the closed session? Executive session? At this time, Ms. Chairman, would you take us into executive session?
Yes, sir. At this time, the board will move into a closed session to discuss matters that have been posted, including matters under various provisions of Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, attorney-client matters, for example, attorney-client matters under Section 551.071, matters. Yeah.
I appreciate the comments, Trustee Kelly, but I want to make abundantly clear that the message communicated from this board going out to the community that owns us is not that they need to figure it out. As mayor of the city, it's not our position that the people who have been struggling through the last 14 months are on their own to figure it out. I understand the financial pressures. I understand the dividend payment back to the city. It's by design. But we are in this together to the very end of this pandemic, and it is not all on the shoulders of this board, nor is it on the shoulders of Paula or the utility or the city. Everybody is picking up a share of the burden, and I want to make sure that the message out of this board is not that we think that the public that owns this company is going to have to go figure it out. We're with them together, and we're going to figure it out together.
Prospective gifts or donations under Section 551.073, personnel under 551.074, security personnel or devices under 551.076, economic development under 551.087, to deliberate, vote, or take final action on competitive matters under Section 551.086, or to deliberate regarding security audits and devices under Section 551.089 and Texas Government Code Section 418.183F for confidential information under the Texas Homeland Security Act. And just for planning, the board does not have any matters to take up at the conclusion of executive session, so when the board concludes, it will come back into open session and adjourn. So if the board is ready to do that, it is now 3:53, and the board will move into executive session.
2021 winter storm response. And the resolution said that after careful reflection and in light of the foregoing, the CPS Energy Board of Trustees hereby approves and initiates a full independent review of CPS Energy's preparation for and responses to the winter storm of February 2021. This review will be directed by and accountable to the Board of Trustees under such processes and by such entities or individuals as the Board of Trustees may hereafter decide, independent of direction or accountability to existing management. The review will include the following: Number one, CPS Energy's preparation for and response to the storm, including preparedness, communication, and management reaction to the situation, including practices that worked well as any that did not. And two, what systems of practices can be considered or implemented to ensure that in the future all stakeholders of the company can be assured that our pillars of security, safety, reliability, resilience, customer affordability, and environmental impact, all grounded in financial responsibility, are well and capably balanced and met. Because I believe the expectation was that we would undertake this review with dispatch, I'm concerned that we have not yet even engaged the outside firm that will do the work. By contrast, SAWS announced that on February 21st, it hired Kansas City-based engineering firm Black & Veatch to answer three basic questions. Those are, was SAWS prepared? Number two, what did SAWS do during the event? And three, what's going to happen next? The expectation was that Black & Veatch would deliver its report within 60 days. So SAWS has either received its report or is to receive its report soon, and we're not even out of the gate. So for the record, I want to express my concern about this state of activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Steen. I did receive some information from the attorney today. I think all board members are supposed to get that information on this resolution for this audit review. And visit with Vice Chair Gonzalez, and she had the information ready, but I told her that it came to us today at the last minute, within 2 or 3 hours, and I asked her, would she bring it for the next month? And it was a reason why I asked that, because we've had 3 audits and reviews in the last, since 2011, and the last one came in 2018-19 that I've never even looked at or heard about until 3 weeks ago. So I asked her to make sure she brings it so everybody has an opportunity to review it, and there was no major rush on it, and that we will get that report at the next board meeting, and then we can make a decision which firm we look to go to, and then we can give them a timeline on what it's going to take to review. Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Dean, move adjourn. Mr. Kelly, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All abstained?